Okay, Chapter 40, Terror at Bottle Creek by White Key. I leaped out of the boat and clawed my way up the mound while behind me Rusty hammered against the boat in a fit of rage. "Hurry," Dad shouted. "I don't know how long this'll hold." I passed one of the smaller hogs lying in the palmetto gourd in the stomach and barely breathing. "Liza," I yelled. I dreaded what I was about to see. I tried to shut out the gruesome images from my mind as I slipped and crawled steadily upward, not even looking for snakes. When I reached the juniper, my eyes went up into the branches. I saw the girls, hanging limply against the jacket straps. "Liza!" The girls weren't moving. Then I saw Liza open her eyes. I felt my heart cave in my chest. I felt like crying, but I coughed and swallowed the feeling away. "Hang on," I said. "Just hang on." Even though Dad was still below, straining against Rusty, it seemed like it was all over, like nothing else could go wrong. I climbed into the tree, and my feet found familiar footing on the crude platform where I'd spent the worst part of the worst night of my life. "Hang on," I said. I balanced before them and fumbled with strap buckles around Francie. She began to weep and whimper while my shaking fingers worked as fast as they could. "We're getting out of here, Francie," I said. I got her loose and put her under my arm and carried her to the ground. I placed her against the base of the juniper. "I'll be back," I said. Francie fell over and curled up in the leaves and pulled her knees up to her chest. "Come on, Court," Dad yelled from below. I stood and looked downhill. "I've got them. They're okay." "Hurry." I pulled myself into the tree again and began untying Liza. She gave me a weak smile. "I knew you'd make it," she said. "Don't talk," I said. The strap came undone and she fell toward me. Perched precariously on the tree branch, I wasn't prepared for this. I clutched her against me with one arm and locked my fingers onto a limb overhead with every bit of strength I had. Slowly, my grip was overcome by her limp weight, and my fingers slipped. Both of us fell backwards and smashed through the limbs the full 10 feet to the ground. I hit on my back with Liza landing heavily on top of me. I felt the wind knocked out of me, and I lay there and stared dizzily at the tree tops. But it was nothing. After all we'd been through, it was nothing. Even though I was struggling to get my breath back, I felt like smiling. Then I heard a metallic snap from below, followed by a hollow pounding against the boat. Rusty squealed horrifically. I rolled away from Liza and lay on my stomach, trying to regain my senses through the fog of confusion. "Court!" Dad yelled. "Get off the ground!" By the strain in his voice, I knew Rusty was loose. In that same instant, I heard the beast smashing through the underbrush, charging uphill. I pushed myself up and grabbed the girls. I barely had time to shove them against the juniper before Francie screamed. I felt fear race electric up my spine and expected the hog to pitchfork me in the back at any moment. When I spun around, I saw his bloody, torn face, inches from my own. Chapter 41. I breathed in the stench of Rusty, dried blood and fetid river mud and sickness. As if making a final display of rage before taking our lives, he plunged his snout into the leaves and tore at the dirt with his tusks. I pressed back against the girls, shoving them closer to the trunk of the tree. In the distance, I thought I heard Dad fighting his way uphill. This time, my mind didn't search for options. I was locked with terror. I thought of nothing but the hog face. "Court!" Dad yelled from below. Francie whimpered softly from behind my back. Rusty continued to squeal and grunt and rake his yellow tusks through the dirt. Images of the night before began to flit through my head like stills from a movie, like it was time to put it all together one last time and try to make sense of it all. I remembered the houseboat bobbing down in the storm-thrashed river, the crash and the slog through the vast swamp, the terrifying sound and vision of the mound when we first came upon it, the look on Liza's face after I knocked the cottonmouth off her heel, death constantly around us, coming for us. There was no sense in it. A black blur appeared from nowhere and bowled into the hog. At first I didn't know what was happening. Then I couldn't believe what I was seeing. "Elmo," I heard Francie say. Bear and hog rolled into a tangled blur of snarling and squealing frenzy. Teeth and claws and tusks and hooves gleamed and slashed beside us like a whirlwind of knives. The fight was so fast and violent and unpredictable that I was too shocked to move. "Court!" Dad yelled again. I looked downhill, but I couldn't see him. Then Elmo came rolling in front of us, and in an instant the hog was on top of him, burying and slashing with his cluttered teeth on the bear's chest. I turned to Liza and Francie. I realized immediately that there was no way I could get them back into the juniper. I shoved them sideways. "Around the tree," I said. Francie began to crawl while Liza stared at me, dazed and disoriented. I stood and grabbed her and dragged her after Francie. We didn't get far before the bear got to his feet and spun and bowled the hog over again. This time the two beasts came so close I felt one of them hit my leg. I waited for the pain to come. Then I drew the courage to look at my shin and saw that it was unwounded. "Stay still," Dad yelled. I looked to my left and saw him standing not 10 years away, holding a useless stick. His face was stricken with horror. I sat against the girls and turned my eyes back to the battle. The bear was on top now, clamping the hog's throat with his teeth and swatting at him with his claws. The hog bucked and squirmed and squealed, its feet kicking clumps of muddy leaves over our laps. "Court!" I glanced at Dad again. There was nothing he could do. We were pinned between the tree and the two beasts fighting to the death. The hog managed to get on top again, and I thought I detected the bear weakening. The wounds in his chest were deep, and his fur was wet with matted with gleaming a purplish color from all the blood. While the hog had gaping wounds all over his body from the tearing claws, he didn't seem slowed. I was certain he'd outlast our big friend. The bear grabbed the hog by the throat, and there was something different about his hold this time. Rusty's body tensed like an electric shock had passed through him. The hog's legs straightened and twitched. The squealing stopped, and all I heard was the growling of the bear through the clenched teeth and a strained gurgling sound from the hog. The bear sensed he had crushed something vital. He rolled on top again, shook his head, clamped down, and snarled viciously. Rusty's crazed eyes grew wide and white as quail eggs, flooded with a suffocating look of desperation. My optimism flared. "Come on, Elmo," I said anxiously. It suddenly occurred to me how foolish it was to take sides. The bear was just as sick and crazed as Rusty. Our imagined friendship with the beast was something born out of desperation. He wasn't 3 feet from us, and there was no reason he wouldn't turn and do to us just what he was doing to the hog. Sorry, I had to take a little break there to answer the phone. I saw Dad edging around the fight, trying to reach us. There was no way I could get both of the girls downhill alone. "I'm coming, Court," he said. The bear kept his lock on the hog, his snarls sounding more like weak sighs. Rusty gurgled and kicked occasionally, the life slowly leaving him. "Francie," I whispered, "can you crawl over to me?" She didn't answer, and I turned and looked at her. "Elmo saved us," she said. "That's right," I said. "Now it's time to go home." I reached out for her and pulled her into my lap. At the same time, Dad was rushing around the backside of the juniper. He grabbed Liza and pulled her to him. "Get up, Court," he said. "Go." I studied the bear again. I saw his eyes watching me, as if wondering what I was waiting for. "I got Francie," I said. Dad hurried away through the underbrush with Liza over his shoulder. I slowly stood with Francie and sidestepped from out between Elmo and the tree. The bear continued to clamp the hog's throat, even though Rusty was clearly dead. "Is Elmo going to die?" Francie said. "Shh," I said. I backed across the clearing of torn dirt and bloody leaves, watching the bear. As if he sensed I was safely away, he released his hold and laid his chin across our dead enemy. His big chest heaved, and his breathing came out rough and bubbly. His eyes closed and opened and looked at us. "We need to help him, Court," Francie said. The thought had crossed my mind. Even though I knew the bear was going to die, it seemed the right thing to do. But it wasn't. It was foolish to think I had any control over the natural way of life and death out here in the swamp. Like Dad had told me, we'd pulled back the curtain, and I'd found what he had warned me about. I'd seen it now, and it was time to close the curtain again and leave it as it was, and never take it for granted again. I turned away and shifted Francie higher. "He's going to be okay," I told her. She rested her chin on my shoulder, and I stepped downhill into the palmetto.